What's up? What's up? I'm Dr. Omatma, host of Egg Meet Sperm, where we're busting fertility myths, sharing tangible tips for your fertility journey, and bringing you the most knowledgeable guests to support your journey to parenthood. This podcast is for both women and men because getting fertile as fuck is for both partners, don't you think? Remember, just listening to this podcast won't get you pregnant, but following the tips we share just may. Let's get you fertile AF so that you can co-create the family you dream of. And if your partner's not listening to this, make sure to share this episode with your partner. Hello and welcome to Egg Meet Sperm. My guest today is a friend, a colleague. Her name is Dora Toma. She is a functional medicine certified health coach specialized in women's health and fertility. For her, everything all started with her own health struggles. First with managing her PCOS diagnosis and Hashimoto's thyroiditis, and then going through a difficult pregnancy that led to premature labor and loss. From that point, she decided to learn all that she could about how to improve her health and optimize her fertility and be able to have a healthy baby. All of these efforts have paid off, and she was able to give birth to a healthy and beautiful girl the following year. Seeing with her own eyes the lack of support that women receive when they are trying to conceive all the way to postpartum, she became a subject matter expert for other women who are going through this season in their lives. Thank you so much for joining us, Dora.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Dr. Obama. It's a great pleasure to be here with you.
Yes, it's such an honor to have you here, and I'm so excited to talk about our topic today, which is going to be cycle tracking.
Yes.
So let's kick it off. Why is cycle tracking so important if someone is trying to get pregnant?
Wow. I think cycle tracking should be one of the first things. In the beginning, women should be knowing, should be aware of her body, and should be taught from early age. The moment a woman or a girl actually starts menstruating, she should understand how her body works, what are the phases of the cycle, how to track their ovulation, and the reason why is that the cycle, it is a fifth vital sign. Even the American College of Gynecologists and Obstetricians, ACOG, they do recognize that the cycle is a fifth vital sign. So it's literally, if anybody doesn't know what the fifth vital sign or what a vital sign is, it's every time you go to the doctor, to the primary doctor, they check you for your pulse, blood pressure, breathing rate, and temperature, right? So they make sure that you're alive and how healthy you are. And those are four. And so the fifth one is your cycle. The cycle will tell you how healthy you are, how your hormones are, if the hormones are balanced, and where you are in that spectrum. So it is of such a valuable information just in general, but specifically when somebody is trying to conceive, it is really important to understand, right? When is the best time to conceive, right? Because we do not get, as a women, we do not get pregnant every single day of the month. As 99%, I don't even know how many, but for sure I was that person when I was in 18 or something, in my early teens. I had no idea that there are a couple of days that I can get pregnant. So the moment I started being actively sexually active, I was like, oh, I'll sign in for the pill because I don't want to, worry about that.
Take any chances.
Yes. And that journey was short for me, which is not common for a lot of women. A lot of women I hear they're for years, decades at even. And it kind of misses that. We're missing that information, and it's something so valuable. So going back to when we're trying to conceive, it is important to understand when we're what is the best sign? Because if the couple is ready, let's do it. Let's get pregnant. It feels like a chore. It feels like it is something that we have to do. It's like it's a project. There is an end goal within that action. Whereas when you're enjoying, you're having fun, you're doing that, it's stress-free. So we don't want to be having sex every single day of the month just to get pregnant. Make sure we want to kind of create that understand when is the actual perfect time, optimal time to conceive. And the cycle can tell us, and the signs of the body actually will tell us. So cycle tracking is basically tracking specific signs that the body is telling us on a daily basis based on the hormones that based on the hormone fluctuations and the inputs that they give us. So, for example, estrogen in the follicular phase is the predominant hormone, and that is what is going to stimulate cervical mucus, or the discharge that we see in the underwear certain days of the month. And obviously that is something absolutely normal, and that we should experience some changes in that. And those changes means that the estrogen is rising and we're getting closer and closer to ovulation. And then another marker that I use, because in my practice, I use the simple thermal method. So this relies on two of the markers, right? The cervical mucus observation, and then it is the basal body temperature. So basal body temperature is the lowest temperature that we have at rest. So meaning when we're sleeping. So, and that temperature we can take either if we're asleep, if you can take the temperature while we're sleeping, or we can take it immediately when we wake up without drinking water, without getting out of bed. The first thing we do is take the temperature, for example, with a digital thermometer under the tongue for a couple of seconds, a minute, and get the temperature, mark it down. So when we are tracking these information, these biomarkers on a daily basis, then we will see something like a chart. So that if somebody's and likes numbers, analytics, and things like that, statistics, that it's exactly what it is. Having that type of information, we understand things like when ovulation happens. If it's too late or too early or too late, then that is a sign that there is potentially the couple will not be able to conceive or will have trouble conceiving. If ovulation doesn't happen, it can also, there are situations like that where a woman has, which is not that common, but it does happen. Woman has regular cycles, but she doesn't always ovulate. Or a woman has irregular cycles, especially women with PCOS. They do experience irregular cycles, and so they don't have no idea when they're going to ovulate, right?
Yeah.
Or if they are going to ovulate, by all means.
Absolutely. And frequently for PCOS women, they're going to see an ovulation or times in their month where they don't actually ovulate. Yet if they're doing something like LH strips at home, you may see an LH surge, but that has nothing to do with ovulation if you have PCOS under the surface.
Yeah, and that's why I'm not the best fan for LH strips.
Yeah,
one, I am a PCOS sister, I'll call it. And a lot of times, there are situations that women experience elevated throughout their cycle of LH. So every single day of their cycle, they test their LH high. Or there are situations that they have their body has several attempts to ovulate. So they'll have multiple LH spikes. So they're like, oh, I had an LH spike, I ovulated. And then they wait for another 60 plus days. I'm like, I'm not pregnant, but I didn't get my period. What's happening? Well, it's probably that she didn't ovulate. So that's why it is so important to use both of these biomarkers, because I do like, and LH strips, right? LH strips are very similar into what is tracking as the cervical mucus. But one, you have to pay for those strips, and then two, you have to actually go to the bathroom, pee in the cup, stick the stick, and then start looking at the lines and just hyper analyze how
is this the surge? Is it going to be tomorrow? Is it happening sometime soon?
Is it darker or is it lighter? Or and it just to me, I feel like 90% of the people who I spoke with, I work with, who use LA strips, they got so stressed about the color of the LA strip, and is this the one? Is that the one?
Yeah.
But the cervical mucus will definitely give you, it's more black and white, basically.
So I completely agree with you. I think that symptothermal tracking is a much easier and better way to understand what's happening in our cycle when we're ovulating, confirming ovulation. None of those things are happening with L8 strips. There's some apps like Mira and Uva and things like that. Like those can be helpful, but I agree that there are a lot of resources right in our home that are essentially free, right? Like if we just take a moment to understand how to track this, then it's relatively easy. So I'm curious if you come across, because I hear this a lot, women that are like, well, yes, but I don't have cervical mucus. So I'm wondering if you hear this a lot, and what do you do if you don't actually see cervical mucus? Or PCOS women are almost the opposite. They have thick cervical mucus for so many days out of a month that it's not really like following the same pattern that we would expect to see.
Yeah, so I do hear that a lot, or just random patterns, or they do experience the most fertile cervical mucus much earlier than ovulation, and that is a question. So first, we want to kind of start with the first step, like and going back to the basics. The first question is kind of like, what is the cervical mucus made out of, right? It's made out of mostly water. Water is the nutrients and kind of, something like that. Antioxidants and things like that, but it's mostly water. So one, are you drinking enough water? Are you drinking enough water throughout the day, or you're barely getting a liter or of something,
right?
And drinking lots of coffee, which will dehydrate you and things like that. So that can definitely be affecting the cervical mucus patterns. Other things, obviously nutrition. Nutrition is a very important part, and making sure that we are eating a balanced meal and a balanced diet in general, right? It's not just about one meal, it's about the overall, and having a fertility friendly meal with lots of vegetables and healthy fats and high quality protein and all the colorful vegetables and so on. But another thing we want to look into, we also want to understand that cervical mucus is driven by estrogen. So if all the basics are done, right? The diet as well, and the sleep, right? The stress management, environmental toxins are also under control, and we make sure that our detoxification pathways are working well. But we also want to look at the hormones, right? And although kind of ties into all of these back to back, but we all want to make sure that estrogen is reduced in the body, and that obviously requires a blood test or other functional testing to make sure that estrogen is produced in the body. And I also want to make sure that, right, there hasn't been any surgeries in the cervical area that could affect the cervical mucus production, because obviously there has been HPV surgeries or any type of invasive surgical procedures done there, it will affect the cervical cells that produce cervical mucus.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, hopefully it's okay if I can add, your estrogen is also driven by testosterone. So if you don't have enough testosterone, which so many women are like, I don't have a sex drive. What's a sex drive? Like, you want me to have sex? No, I'm forcing myself to have sex so that we can have a baby. Like,
Correct.
so if you don't have a sex drive, probably your testosterone is tanked. If you don't have testosterone, you don't have the building blocks for estrogen. So it's a little bit like, at least what I see is, you see a surge in sex drive, then a surge in cervical mucus, and then the surge in baby T. So if those are out of order, or you're like, wait, I already ovulated, but now I have a sex drive, things are a little wonky. And that's where you want to, I think what you said in terms of like, make sure you're doing the foundational things, drink enough water, getting enough green leafy vegetables, antioxidants, all the things that you have control over in your day-to-day life. And then I would say even just the act of tracking, like the awareness of, wait, I see cervical fluid 8 days out of a month and they're not back to back and it's totally random and I don't see a pattern. That's an indicator that you need to go and talk to someone who can support you in figuring it out. Right?
Exactly.
Like, I think a lot of people are like, well, I'm tracking, but now what? You know
Exactly.
what I mean? Like,
yeah, what am I going to do with this
Right.
information? And that is the beauty of cycle tracking, is the more cycles we the more cycles we have under our belt, the more we understand what is our natural pattern, because every single person has their own unique pattern, obviously within certain ranges. And also we want to understand when is off. So if and what I always suggest my clients is to track for at least 3 cycles, and then to understand what is their pattern. And from there, use that pattern. And if there is one cycle that is kind of wonky, then use that, okay, this is an outlier. I'm going to look to see if the next cycle will be off as well, and go from there. If it continues the pattern the next couple of cycles, it means that there is actually something wrong. But there are always going to be variations. Ovulation never happens on the same day. On the same day. Like only 13% of cycling per people, let's say, right? They ovulate on day 14, right? It's everybody else ovulates on all the other days. And even if somebody usually ovulates on day 14, it doesn't mean that every single cycle for the rest of their life they will be ovulating on that day. That's why it's important to track every single month, even though you're aware of you've cycled a couple of dozens of cycles so far. And even my case, I usually ovulate on day 15. But some months I ovulate on day 17. Some months I ovulate on day 13, because ovulation is the most variable event and the most important event in our cycle. And if things like stress, like illness, like getting a flu or being any type of sick, having traveling and changing time zones, all of these things will affect ovulation, can delay ovulation, can change it off. That's why it's important to understand, if you're trying to conceive, you want to know when is your fertile window, and then when you're approaching ovulation, when is the closest time. Because it's not just about like shooting right in the middle of to the target. Exactly on the day of ovulation. Actually, based on statistics, the best day, the highest chances of to conceive is actually the day before ovulation. So, and then next day is also obviously a high, but it's not the highest. So we
Right.
want to kind of aim to as close as possible, but not just random.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of like when people should start tracking, when like in terms of, let's say I'm starting to try to conceive now. Should I have started tracking a few months ago? Should I start now? Do I wait and try for a few months and then start tracking? Like, what's the optimal timeline for this?
Yeah, I mean, one honestly, the sooner the better. If you can track when you were young and started your cycles, but if you're thinking about trying to conceive in the next couple of months, and start now. If you haven't charted your cycles, and you're ready to try to conceive, start now. The sooner the better. It doesn't matter when you're going to track your cycles. And if you've been trying for a while and you haven't tracked your cycles, which is very often, especially with my clients, a lot of them do just use apps to track their periods, and that's obviously not. That's just the littlest thing that you can do, but any time is better than none, basically.
Okay, awesome. And then are there any like major lifestyle things that affect ovulation or the cycle in general? Um, I have a few that I'm thinking of. So I'll let you go first and then I'll ask you specifics if I don't hear the ones I'm thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned a couple of them in the for ovulation, like travel, being sick, stress, major stressors in your life, but also that can sleep deprivation can definitely affect. That can from one standpoint, it increases the stress in the body. If we're not getting enough rest, then the body will be more and more stressed. So that can affect and can even throw off if it's chronic. If the person is sleep deprived for a chronic time, then for a long term, then ovulation can just be shut off. Other things, even poor nutrition and being undernourished, cutting a lot of calories. I see this very often with women that are overweight or women that are normal weight, but they want to have a specific figure, specific, body fat. And I mean, hey, I'm coming from the same place. I had the same idea before. In order to get pregnant, I need to be fit, and I wanted to be a specific body fat percentage, but that is not natural to the body and to in the conception part. And yeah, if you have any other,
the only other one was alcohol, which
alcohol, of
really
course,
is going to throw off ovulation. It's going to throw off your period. It's going to throw off, it actually is
the basal body
estrogenic,
temperature.
so it's going to raise your BBT. You're going to have weird looking charts if you consume alcohol, basically.
Yeah. So especially if you're consuming alcohol around ovulation, then you'll not be able to confirm ovulation. That is mainly the reason why it will throw off your chart and your basal body temperature. So alcohol, it's not great.
Yeah,
it's not ideal for
these are like
time.
I think the things that you listed are just so important because we don't ever learn this stuff. And we sometimes I like talk to so many women that are like, we've taught them how to BBT chart, but then they're like, wait, my chart looks weird all of a sudden. Like, what happened? And they're traveling across the world, And I'm like, well, you're traveling. That's completely out the window. Like, just don't even bother. Do it, but it's still going to be affected because you're traveling. The minute that your body experiences some physiological stressor, psychological stressor, emotional stress, all of that can throw off whether or not you're ovulating as well as what your chart looks like that month. So I think it's just important to know. And it's like a visual reminder or a visual representation of what your body's experiencing. And that's why I love tracking, cycle tracking so much, is like you have a feedback system, and literally no one has taught us how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And once you start doing it, you're like, wait a second, I thought I was way more regular than this. Or like, I expected something completely different. So I think it's just like a really cool way for us to have feedback about our own body and this fifth vital sign that I've never heard any doctor ask me about.
I know.
Right? Isn't it crazy? Like, wait, this is our fifth vital sign, yet half of the population doesn't know that it exists. And
not
your
even
doctor never asks you about it.
Especially the obstetrician and gynecologists who are basically under the ACOG, right?
Yeah.
So and they only ask you when was your last period, but that it misses like
what does that
mean? Other information.
Yeah.
It's so other more information.
Yeah,
I mean,
so much.
How was your? I mean, I asked so many questions with my new client. From, okay, when did you get your first period, to how long is your period, how long is your cycle, symptoms, cramps, pain, PMS, of blood flow, how many days,
the color of the blood, the clots, the quality. Like, there's just so much that is
just the period tells you. But then, when you're relating, how long is your luteal phase, how high is your basal body temperature. There are other things, right? Other elements that can tell us about our hormones. And not only will tell us, because I mentioned earlier that it will give us the information like that things are doing well, but also if somebody like is trying to balance their hormones, and I'm going to throw out again the example of PCOS, because it's such common and everybody understands it. Because women with PCOS have such irregular cycles, but when they're making those dietary lifestyle interventions, they will, if they're tracking their cycles, they'll also start seeing those changes in their cycle. It's kind of like we'll be able to track and monitor those changes and see the progress. It's also motivating to see the progress that you're doing. And I have so many clients who have PCOS and seeing, oh my God, my cycle has been, oh my God, I have ovulated around day 15. Oh my God, my cycle has been 35. And we just celebrate. It's just a moment of like, yes, I'm on the right path. So just because they didn't get pregnant that cycle, seeing that their cycle has shifted so much, it's a sign that, okay, I'm on the right path. So it's so valuable. And when somebody is trying to conceive, right, it's also important to have healthy progesterone. And the basal body temperature can tell us not only when we have ovulated, but how long is the luteal phase, and if it's long enough to sustain a pregnancy. And even the temperatures, how high they go, can tell us how strong is progesterone to sustain that pregnancy. So much information. The cycle will tell us. Just real-time feedback. You don't have to do tests. You don't have to go to the lab. You don't have to do any pricking.
And it's almost free. It's essentially free.
Yes, exactly.
There's one question I get a lot, so I'm curious about your answer to this. Do you have a favorite digital thermometer that is like quote unquote accurate? Because I've debated this with so many people. I'm like, I don't think there is one, but if you have a favorite, I would love to know it.
I do have it. It's like any temp thermometer. They do have their flaws.
Yeah.
But my favorite one is Temp Drop. I
Okay.
think
Yeah. Yeah.
from and the reason why, I mean, I have multitude of them.
Mhm.
I have at home Temp Drop, but I love it because it's convenient.
Mhm.
So it's not too expensive.
Yeah.
It's very easy to use. Just put it under your arm, in your arm,
Mhm.
turn it on, sleep with it, wake up,
Take it off.
take it, take it
Yep.
off, sink it, and say goodbye.
Yeah.
You don't
Yeah.
have to do a lot of things. Especially I'm a mom of 2-year-old, and when she wakes up, I'm like just I cannot tell her, like, just wait until I take my temperature and then I'll come to you. It's nothing like that. There is
Right.
no
There's no such thing.
no such thing. So and obviously the waiting times, and especially if somebody's breastfeeding and things like that,
Mhm.
it can mess up the temperatures, because we
Yeah.
need to get a specific amount of hours to
Sleep
sleep
time. Yeah.
in order to reach that lowest core temperature. But that is one of the reasons why I love, and has been proven to be effective for women with PCOS, for a lot of women. So it's one of the top, like, my favorite ones.
Mhm.
Another one I love is Oura Ring. I wear an Oura
Mm.
Ring. It's a sleep
Mm.
tracker. It has multitude of things. But obviously it's more expensive, but definitely gives you more data.
Mhm.
And they're pretty simple, pretty accurate.
Are you seeing the with the Aura Ring, are you getting a BBT chart from it?
So with Oura Ring, you get they only track the variations of temperature.
Okay. That's
So
what I thought. I was like, I'm not getting that. I have an Aura Ring too. So I'm
you see,
like, where did I miss?
but you see the because there is the 0 level,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes.
And
You see how
the
much higher it went, how much lower it went.
yes. So you see that the when, like, the follicular phase, basically the lower temperatures, and the
Yeah.
higher temperatures is the luteal phase, and you can track that. Doesn't specifically exactly give you the number. If somebody wants to have, like, the traditional charts, Oura Ring has a collaboration with Natural
Natural
Cycles,
cycles. Yeah.
so it can sync in and get the exact number and
Okay.
have all the data that a typical cycle tracking app has. I'm
Okay.
in my guessing mind, I think Oura Ring will eventually develop something like that, and they'll not rely on these collaborations,
Mhm.
but who knows when. And this can be also Natural Cycles requires membership on top of
Nice.
that, on top of the member paying the Oura Ring, paying the membership
Yeah.
for the Oura Ring, and then Natural Cycles. So it's a lot more money. That's why I love
Temp drop
Temp
is
Drop.
kind of it for us too. Like we just gift all of our clients one because we love it. Like temp drop just makes life so much easier. You don't have to manually measure your temperature every morning. You don't have to remember. You don't have to wake up at the same time, right? Like it takes away a lot of the hurdles that used to be there with basal body temperature tracking. And it's accurate. It's way more accurate than doing it manually, etc. So lots of advantages. I agree with you. I'm
Mhm.
a huge fan. Um, yeah. So for those of you that are listening, a little bit warning that comes with a lot of experience is do not bring your temperature charts to your OBGYN. Just don't. Like, they don't know what to do with this information. Bring it to someone who can read it. Bring it to someone who can look at it and say, oh, I see what might be happening. Maybe your progesterone isn't actually increasing, and we need to focus on how to improve your egg quality. So, you're going to get a lot more information and feedback from talking to someone who actually understands how to use this data.
Correct.
And not all practitioners are made that way. I've heard a lot of women come in, and I have one of them came in with a binder. She's like, here's 3 years of data. And I'm like, you've been tracking for 3 years. This woman's manually tracking. Like,
I love
she's
it.
like, I've woken up at the same time every single year, every single day for 3 years so that I can get this data. I brought it to my doctor. They said everything was fine and that I would never have a child because my AMH is too low. and I need an egg donor. And I looked at all of her data and I was like, I see what's happening. You have too much estrogen. And she's like, what? Are you serious? And I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure. Let's test. And we find out. And sure enough, too much estrogen. Her hormones were a little wonky. We fixed it. This woman went on to have two babies, not one, two. After being told she would never have her own child, she needed an egg donor and she was too old, the whole thing, right? Like, all this data means nothing. There's nothing to do from it. Like, good luck to you, kind of thing. And I was like, this is so disheartening to hear that someone has been to multitudes of doctors for years who have just kind of like thrown it away as like, sorry, not useful. Good that you're doing it, keep doing it, but not really useful. So I'm like, yeah. So this, like, I love cycle tracking. I think every single person should do it. I think it's worth learning for yourself what to do with this information. But in the meantime, if you're like, hey, I need some answers, I need to figure out why this is not happening, talk to someone like Dora or myself to figure out why this is not happening for you. There is a reason, and your BBT chart almost always will tell you the reason.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's why we're doing it, right? That's why we're doing it.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's
Absolutely.
and that's why I love, like you said in your example, you'll see how the hormones work and where to look, where to test. Right? We don't want to shoot and do all the tests from of the face of the planet just for the sake of doing it. If we have a red flag already in the chart, we can get to the answer, to the solution much faster just by tracking the cycles.
Yeah, absolutely. Lovely. I love that we had this conversation because I am a huge fan of cycle tracking. I'm a huge fan of you. Thank you for all the amazing work that you're doing in the world in terms of educating and supporting women. And where can people connect with you?
Yes, the first place and where I'm most active is Instagram, and my handle is Your Fertility Coach Dora. My website is also the same, yourfertilitycoachdora.com. That on Instagram, basically, you'll find all the tips possible when in this journey of trying to conceive. I do use food first approach, so I always like to discuss on diet and all the lifestyle habits that are doable. I'm not to the extreme of like you have to stand and you have to go to XYZ gym and do cold plunges and do 6 times a day and sauna only at midnight and things like that in order to get pregnant.
Yes, we're not crazy.
Yeah, we're not crazy. And I'm so against restrictive diets and things like that. Everything has to be personalized. Everything has to be suited for that person in order to work. And it's not about perfection. It's about achieving that, moving forward as quickly as possible in order to support the body and restore their fertility and just be healthy and be able to not just conceive, but have a healthy baby, have a healthy recovery, and just be happy with your new family.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Thank you so much for joining us. We will put a link for you. Dora has a really amazing gift that is using the code EggMeetSperm, so make sure to check that in the show notes. And we look forward to hearing all of your amazing tips for the rest of the week, Dora. Thank you so much for joining us. And for those of you listening in, we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much. It was a great pleasure talking with you.
Likewise. Was that an amazing episode or what? Make sure to check our show notes so that you can link up with our guests. And if you're not a part of our secret Fertile AF community, you can join for free via the link in our show notes. Last but not least, have you showed us some love lately? It would mean the world to us if you could share and review our podcast. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time on Egg Meets Sperm. Peace.